Hi, and welcome to the Olive Branch Community Church. It's great to be with you here today. Today is, in person, is our water baptism Sunday. It's amazing to see when people come forward and publicly declare their faith in Jesus. So we celebrate as a church with those people today. Sorry you're missing out, but we are still happy that you are with us here for our online service. Today, Pastor Ken continues his message series entitled, How's That Working For You? And today's a really good, encouraging message, especially for those of us where we're just like, why do I feel like I keep hitting the wall and things are not working, and I frankly just don't find myself in a fruitful spot in life? Today is a great, encouraging message that you don't want to miss. So stick around and make sure that you receive everything that the Holy Spirit wants to say to you today. So let's not spend any more time with announcements and such, and let's spend some time worshiping Him and then receiving what the Lord would have to say to us today.
On the God of Jacob, whose love endures through generations. I know that you will keep your covenant. I'm calling on the God of Moses, the one who opened up the ocean. I need you now to do the same thing for me. Oh God, my God, I need you. Oh God, my God, I need you now. How I need you now. Oh rock of ages, I'm standing on your faithfulness, your faithfulness. I'm calling on the God of Mary, who favor rests upon the lowly. I know with you all things are possible. I'm calling on the God of David, who made a shepherd boy courageous. I may not face Goliath, but I've got my own giants. Oh God, my God, I need you. Oh God, my God, I need you now. How I need you now. Oh rock of ages, I'm standing on your faithfulness, your faithfulness. Oh God, my God, I need you. Oh God, my God, I need you now. How I need you now. Oh rock of ages, I'm standing on your faithfulness, your faithfulness. You heard your children then, you hear your children now. You are the same God, you are the same God. You answered prayers back then, and you will answer now. You are the same God, you are the same God. You were providing then, you are providing now. You are the same God, you are freed the captives then. You're freeing hearts right now. You are the same God. You are the same God. You touched the leper then. I feel your touch right now. You are the same God. You are the same God.
Today closes out the series that we've been in for these last number of weeks called How's That Working For You? Kind of a question that counselors many times ask us when we're going through the same stuff over and over again, and it's creating pain, creating all this stuff. They'll say, how's that working for you? And what it basically means is, you got to decide. Are you going to keep on going the same way and expecting different results, or are you going to change? And that's kind of the option that's in front of us. So this is really all about staying connected to Jesus and the life that he brings and how he helps us in all the different emotions that we go through when our lives go off the rails and life is just not working for us. So that's where we're going. And the bottom line, Jesus is basically saying to people who follow him, just be the branch. Be the branch. Remain in me. I will remain in you, and you'll bear fruit. You can't do anything without me, which is absolutely true. 2020, a news story came out with the headlines, California mom crushed to learn plant she watered for 2 years is fake. Interesting, isn't it? Huh? A woman by the name of Kaylee Wilkins is quoted as basically saying, I was so proud of this plant. It's so full and beautiful coloring and just an overall perfect plant. And I had a watering plan for it. And if anybody, tried to water it, my succulent, I would get defensive about it. So how did she discover the truth? What happened, okay? Well, she tried to actually transplant the plant into a larger container, and she found out that the thing was made of plastic. And she goes on to say, I put so much love into this plant. I washed its leaves. I tried my hardest to keep it looking its best, and it's completely plastic. How did I not know this? Well, that's a good question, isn't it? How did she not know it for 2 years? She's been watering this thing, and it's a plastic plant. But, it's one thing to do that for 2 years. It's another thing to, be expecting that something that is a kind of a plastic plant, something that is not going to bring any life, just put your whole life into it, and then you get to the end of your life and you find out that you've been connected to the wrong thing. We are supposed to be connected. Jesus said, I am the true vine. And there are other vines out there, We can connect to the romance vine. Think, if I find the love of my life, they're going to fulfill my life. Or, if it can get into money and possessions and success and all these things, and we hook our lives up to them thinking, that this is just going to bring life to me, when it doesn't have any life. Jesus is the one who has life. So, let me just read the passage. Jesus writes this, I am the true grapevine, and my Father is the gardener, okay? He's the gardener. He cuts off every branch of mine that doesn't produce fruit, and he prunes the branches that do bear fruit so that they will produce even more. You've already been pruned and purified by the messages I have given to you. Remain in me, and I will remain in you, for a branch cannot produce fruit if it's severed from the vine, and you cannot be fruitful unless you remain in me. Now, the story of God and humans actually starts with dirt, starts in the dirt that God created, starts back in the Garden of Eden, And I once did a message called Between the Trees, and that's kind of the way it works, okay? We're between the trees. And Genesis 2 and 3, talks about life, talks about God creating everything and all these plants and everything in this garden that he planted, he called the Garden of Eden. Now, it also tells at the end of this chapter, end of Genesis chapter 3, that we fell. We kind of moved away, and we were basically banished from the garden. And this goes up to the cross, where Jesus died on a tree, died on a cross, And then it ends in Revelation 22 where there's life again, where we're back in the garden. So God created the original garden and the people to put in it. God met with them every evening in the cool of the day in that garden. And because they disobeyed, they had to leave the garden. Jesus has his chat with his followers, in the Garden of Gethsemane, where he went often to pray and so on. And he talked about branches and talked about pruning, And the next day, Jesus died on a tree, after he had given this talk to them. And he's buried in the garden tomb. And when Mary comes out to the tomb to see Jesus, he's not there, and she meets him, and she thinks that maybe he's the gardener. And in Revelation, a whole story goes back to the garden. We live in between the trees, and it finishes in the garden of God in Revelation chapter 22. Now, does anybody see a theme here? There is a theme, isn't it? Jesus is the true vine, which means, as I mentioned, that there are other fake vines out there. We need to be connected to the true vine so we don't end up with a plastic plant at the end of our lives. And for a branch, everything depends on the connection. You know this, right? If you've ever raised anything, you know that if anything's going to grow on that, especially fruit, it has to have the sap and all the nutrients that come from the ground. It has to have, all of the sunshine that gets kind of put in through photosynthesis and so on. Now, today we're celebrating baptism. Baptism is the starting place of the Christian life. This is where we get connected with Jesus, the true vine. We come to him, we say, I know I've failed, and I need you desperately, and I want life. And we are connected to him, and then we begin to grow. And when we begin to grow, the Spirit of God then begins to develop fruit in us. And what happens is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Love replaces indifference, and joy replaces fear and pessimism, and peace replaces anxiety and the hostility that we have. Patience replaces agitation and anger, and kindness replaces self-preservation. Goodness replaces malice and deceit. Faithfulness replaces self-interest. Gentleness and humility replace pride. And self-control replaces recklessness. That's what God is doing in our lives. Those are the people that he is calling us and wanting us to be. And I'll tell you, what I want is I want fruitfulness. I want to bear fruit. I want to make a difference with my life. And I'm thinking you probably do too. So what I want to do is I want to kind of start out with a phrase in this passage that kind of makes us nervous. It says that every branch that does not bear fruit, the gardener, God, the Father, the gardener, cuts off. Now, most of us have been cut off at some point, right? Somebody, unfriended us, somebody, unfollowed us, somebody, pushed us out of their circle of influence. And we kind of know sometimes when this is going to happen because, we talk to a friend, we tell them about our lives and so on, and then it starts coming around again that they've obviously talked outside of the circle. Other people know about this. And then when we try to connect with them and find out about it, we get ghosted, which is the whole thing for, basically being treated like you don't exist. Now, I've had to block people out of my life, okay? Lori and I, several years ago, there was a couple of toxic people in our lives that we had to kind of cut off, okay? We've all experienced this. I've got people blocked in my phone. None of you, don't worry about that. It's usually, people who are calling to sell me something, people I don't know. So we have this happen in our lives, Sometimes it's a spouse. Somebody promised that their undying love to you, that they were going to be with you to the end, that they would always love you, and then they didn't, okay? Sometimes it's an ex-boss or an ex-employer or other kinds of exes in our lives. We have people that we have cut off, people that we have been cut off by, okay? And sometimes when it comes to these people, they honestly deserve to be blocked. They're dangerous people. They're dangerous to our social life. They're dangerous to us in other ways. Their intent is to harm us. So sometimes they need to be cut off. So here's the question. Here's the question I want to ask. What would you do with you if you were God? What would you do? Okay? He accepted you just as you were. He forgave all of your sins and continues to forgive you and wipes out the past. He's been faithful to you. He's helped you. He's encouraged you. He's fed you. He's always loved you and helped you to serve others and forgive others as you've been forgiven. And that's his will. He wants us to then pass that on to other people like we've received it. To not just have this, swimming pool that we're filled up with this fire hose from heaven, of all these good things that come. It's intended to leak. It's intended to get out into the lives of other people and so on. And the question is that happening? Is there something happening in your life where the goodness that God has done for you has been passed on to others? Where the forgiveness that he's given you has been passed on by you forgiving other people that don't deserve to be forgiven? It's quite easy to get into the mode of pretty much being, self-interested. And when God comes looking for fruit, well, he doesn't find it, because there are people in our lives who need the fruit, okay? They need somebody to love them. They need somebody to be patient with them. They need somebody, to be kind to them and somebody to be good to them. There are people in our lives, people in our path who would blossom like crazy if some of the fruit that we have in our lives gets out and into their lives. That's a big deal. That's a really big deal. Now, God has given me everything I have. He's given you everything I have. Sometimes, though, there just isn't that much coming back. It's all one-sided. He's doing all these things for you. And if you've ever had somebody like that in your life, you know what that feels like. And so the question is, if there's not much coming back from your life, if there's not much going out from your life into the lives of others, what would you do with you if you were God? Because he's looking for fruit. I mean, what do you do with selfish and, self-preoccupied people, in your life, People who want the blessings of the vineyard, but, they don't want to bear fruit. They don't want to give back. They just want to take. And sometimes that's what happens in our lives. God's looking for us to bear fruit that goes into the lives of others. And this is really, really important for us to understand. Power of God works in our lives. And the fruit that he brings in our lives, it's not for you. It's not for me. It's not about you, and it's not about me. It's for others. I mean, you look at it. Who's love for? We love ourselves plenty, Who's patience for? Who's peace for? Who is kindness for? And goodness and faithfulness and gentleness and humility and self-control. It's all for other people. And if it doesn't get out into their lives, then we kind of lose the plot here. Now, here's where things change. God does not treat us as we deserve to be treated, and he doesn't treat us like we treat other people. His patience and his kindness comes toward us even when we don't deserve it. That's the whole point of grace. So he comes looking for fruit in us, and if he finds no fruit in us, there's none of this stuff coming out, then what does he do? Cut off, if you read this passage, it basically says, well, too bad, I came looking for fruit, you didn't have any, so man, clip, you're gone. Now, if that's true, how would anybody ever stand a chance? When God comes looking for fruit and he doesn't find fruit, and that kind of goes against what Jesus said, remain in me and I will remain in you. It also goes against, what was said, what Paul said, that nothing can separate us from the love of God. Nothing, absolutely nothing can separate us from the love of God. Now, this is the way it works in the marketplace, though, isn't it? Like you don't produce, man, you're out. Like if you come in and they're paying you to do a job and you don't do the job, you're out. That's just kind of the way it works. If you're a CEO and, the stock isn't going up, like you're probably on your way out. Does God operate by the same rules? And I don't think he does, okay? Now, if you were raised in a performance-oriented church, this may be what you're thinking. Like people in your church broke the rules and, man, we threw them out. Like they're not supposed to be here. They're not supposed to be with the good branches here. So the question is, how does this square with God? Now, I want to throw something out there, and I think it will be really helpful in understanding that passage where it talks about, where God says, he comes looking for fruit, and if there's no fruit, we get, in the word there, cut off. Now, you probably don't know what this is, but this is a massive Greek-English dictionary or lexicon, and this is one of my books in seminary. I don't usually bring out the pots and pans, but I'll tell you, this is a really big deal, okay? The word that's used here for cut off is airo. Primary use, like you read through the New Testament, the primary use of this word is lift up. It says, lift up your hands in prayer. Like if you cut off your hands, that's a whole different thing, isn't it? Or pick up. Jesus told the guy in John chapter 8, same book, pick up your mat and go home. Or right there, I was thinking about my son and put his name in there instead. Or they picked up stones to stone Jesus in John chapter 8, verse 57, because he had proclaimed himself to be I am. Totally different. So for it to mean cut off in this passage, it seems to go against what we know about God, and it seems to go against what we actually know in terms of actually how this word is used. This is really, really important here, okay? Let me kind of give an illustration to you. Years ago, we had this Cutlass, 1991 Cutlass Sierra. Maybe it was a 90, but it was a Cutlass Sierra, and we called it Bob, affectionately. So Kelly drove Bob out to the Markville Mall and with a couple of friends and so on. We got a frantic call from her, basically saying that she had actually locked the keys in the car with the car running, which, because it's an old car, you can actually do that. Now, if I had said to Kelly, okay, I'm going to IRO you, so it can mean two things, right? I'm going to cut you off, which is one way of interpreting it, or I'm going to pick you up. In this case, bring the keys out to the car. It means two very different things, two very different scenarios. So how would she know the difference? Well, it's basically the character. Like if she knows who I am, and I'm the kind of person who doesn't cut people off, certainly not cut her off, but I would pick her up, then that's what she's going to see. And that's how you kind of look at this passage too. It's the character of God to pick us up when we've fallen down. And so the point of this is, that if we aren't bearing fruit, he sometimes, this is the way it happens. Gardeners need to go out and they need to pick the branches up out of the mud and the dirt and clean them off and tie them up. We used to live in a place called Northeast Pennsylvania, which strangely enough was in the northwestern part of Pennsylvania. But it was where Welch's had their big plant, to make jelly and jam and grape juice and all that stuff. So I got to know quite a few grape farmers, okay? And I know that just about, either in the spring or late fall, what they would do is they would come mostly in the spring and they would tie grapes, which meant that they would get the branches out of the mud, out of the dirt, and they would tie them up on the wire, between the posts that kind of formed the whole grape vineyard thing and so on. Because of the fact that grape branches can't grow grapes while they're dragging in the mud. You have to pick them up, you have to clean them off. And that, I think, is exactly what Jesus is saying here. Because sometimes we're like that. I mean, not only are we not growing grapes, man, we're not even growing leaves, okay? And what we need to be picked up. We need to be cleaned off. And, so the Father comes along and he either, gives us the Kevorkian treatment, well, they're not growing anything, so let's just whack them off, Or he says, let's call the EMTs, let's call the ambulances, let's call the fire company, let's go into the emergency room, let's get them back to life so that they can be fruitful. And I think that depicts the character of the Father. Now, there's another word here in this context of fruitfulness, and it's the word prune. And the word prune does mean cut off, okay? Not in the sense of cutting the whole thing off, but in trimming us back so that we can be who we're supposed to be. And again, this is a grape vineyard word. I mean, I used to see this all the time, especially in the late fall. They would call workers in to come into the vineyard, and they would prune off the vines. In fact, some people would say that you need to trim off at least something like 40% or 50% of the growth that's there so that it can actually grow stuff, Some of you have had roses, and somebody's had to come in and prune them. You say, hey, you're cutting off all the roses. What's going on, because things need to be pruned back. Now, here's the thing with our Father in heaven, okay? He's the official sponsor of He renews, he restores, he redeems, he replaces, and he resurrects. That's who he is. And so he has to do that. He many times has to prune us back so that we can actually bear fruit. Sometimes there's disease stuff that's growing us. We have diseased branches, Our bodies sometimes need pruned. I don't know if I've had some skin cancer. I had a piece taken off my face a couple years ago, okay? Because you leave it there and it's not good. It needs to be pruned off, needs to be cut off. If you have a tumor, you need to, get that out. If they can get it at it and get at it as soon as possible, they can sometimes save your life if it's cancerous tumor. So we need this kind of stuff pruned out of our body. We want it pruned out of our body, right? Sometimes Sometimes it's a little bit more than that. Sometimes it's basically cutting the suckers off. And I used to see them do this too. They would go out, usually in the spring when things first started to grow, and they would sucker the vines. And what that basically means is there are these little shoots that will grow off of the bottom of a vine or where the branches are and so on, and they're growing leaves and everything. And they're just growing like crazy, and it's very green, quite contagious with their growth. The problem is they're called suckers for a reason. And that means that they suck the life, they suck the juice, they suck the nutrients out of what ought to be going into the branch, what ought to be going into the grapes or the apples or something else. And you got to get them off there because they're just taking stuff away. And sometimes that needs to happen in our lives, okay? There's stuff, sometimes it's disease. Sometimes, there's stuff that's just, going to corrupt our lives and ruin our fruitfulness, Sometimes to actually get that off of our lives, God has to bring it out into the open. And it's embarrassing, and it brings out the secret sin that's going on in our lives, and we're humiliated by it. We feel bad about it, but we won't stop it unless something happens, unless He finds a way to prune it out of our lives. And He cares enough about us to do that. He also cares enough about us to get the suckers out of us, the little things that suck the energy and suck the time and everything like that. I mean, one of those things could be one of these, right? I mean, you can sit down. I see people do this. They can sit down for hours, be going through Instagram, be going through Facebook, be going through all their emails, and playing games, and checking out all the stuff that's going on all over the world, scrolling through Google and through Reddit and all these other things. Like, you can spend hours on this thing. And the question is it good time? I mean, obviously we need them. They're great tools and so on. But when it gets to be something that just sucks time and energy, then it's not good. There's other things. One couple I heard, basically said they figured out that, their kids' sports were just sucking the life out of their family. Like, everybody was in the van all the time, taking them here, taking them there, getting them to practice, getting them to games, and driving across the province and so on. And said, enough is enough. And they had to kind of prune it back in their lives. Now, here's what's really interesting, especially I've noticed this after COVID. People have done pruning in their lives, and what they've done is they've kind of pruned God out of their lives. They pruned the church out of their lives, and they don't really, they're not spending the time doing the things that can really help them to bear fruit. And that time is going someplace, the energy is going someplace, and the question is it going someplace good? So besides the trimming that needs to take place, there were the suckers had to be taken out. And then sometimes when they come in to prune, they have to actually take good stuff off, okay? And to basically so that the tree or whatever can grow. We have a tree just down the street from our house on a dirt road, and as you can see here in this picture, it had tons of apples. I mean, there were hundreds of apples on this branch. The problem is that they were little tiny things that you couldn't eat and so on, and the weight of them actually broke this branch right off the tree. It needed to be pruned. And that's what happens in our lives. There are things that are not necessary. There are things that are going to hinder us as we move forward. And God has to somehow bring in the pruning shears and bring the stuff out of our lives. Now, here's the deal. When God comes in with the pruning shears and He's coming after these little suckers in our lives, or coming after something that just needs to be trimmed, or some of the flowers that need to be cut off so that we can create more flowers, some of the things in our lives that are just taking time and energy and keeping us from fruitfulness, we see the scissors, or we see the pruning shears, and we can run, in the other direction. He's got something sharp. He's coming after me. Well, that's where you have to trust the character of the Father. That He's not coming to just cut you off the vine and get rid of you. He's coming to do something that's going to be restorative. It's like going in for surgery, People come out with saws and knives and all kinds of stuff. I mean, to replace a hip is like a lot of work and so on, and there's a lot of mess there, but it helps you to walk again. And there are things in our lives, friends, if we do not own up to them and let God work on them, then, it can create a lot of problems. And the question is, what do you do when you have a friend who tries to talk to you about something that's going on in your life? Wasn't me, not me, couldn't possibly be me, stay away from me. Is this how it works, You tell me about my faults, I'll tell you about your faults. And sometimes we just get so incredibly, incredibly defensive and angry that we just don't listen. if you blow this off, if you just refuse to let other people have any kind of say or any input into your life, if you put your hand in God's face, you could miss something that can save your life. I remember this, and the reason we do this is because we're afraid. I remember hearing a story about a woman who, started growing this tumor, and she was afraid to go in and get it checked out to find out what was going on. This thing grew to 300 pounds, okay? She was incapacitated. She couldn't do anything, and it could have been fixed, when it was just a small thing. We sometimes, out of fear, we let stuff grow in our lives that just stumps all the fruitfulness that God wants to do. Jesus said, I'm the vine, you are the branches, and my Father is the original gardener. If you just cooperate with him, you can have a fruitful life. Be the branch. Be the branch. Today, a bunch of people are going to get baptized, And what this basically means is they're saying, I knew I need Jesus, and I gave my life to him, and I want to be connected to him for the rest of my life. Sometimes, people say things like, well, I don't know if I'm ready to be baptized. Well, it's like a baby inside its mother saying, I'm not sure if I'm ready to come out yet, Like, I don't want to go out with my hair looking like this. It just becomes this dumb thing. This is birth, and so this is the celebration that we have when people are born. And we change, we grow the fruit of the Spirit after we're born, after we connected with the one who can actually help us. Let's go back to the question. What would you do with you? See, because a lot of times, we get into the dirt and we get discouraged and we get down into the weeds and stuff, and we start feeling really bad about our lives and so on, and we just basically stay there and we don't move anywhere. We don't go where we're supposed to go. And so that's how some of you feel about your life. You think, I'm a mess, I'm discouraged, I'm disappointed in myself, Well, God may be disappointed in what we're doing and so on. He might be disappointed in the way our lives are turning out, but that doesn't stop him from wanting to be the gardener who can help us to become, who we're supposed to be. He doesn't cut us off. He picks us up and he helps us out. And the point I want to make is, don't you dare accuse somebody and say that God is not interested in them, which is, in this case, it would be you. Don't say that, because it says God's love reaches us wherever we're at. Nothing can separate us from the love of God. And he delights in reaching down into the dirt and mess and picking us up out of it. I want to read a story in closing that kind of bears this truth, and it comes out of this book. And by the way, these are the books I've used, obviously the Bible, and then Brene Brown's book, Atlas of the Heart, and this book, Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, and then this book, When Your Way Isn't Working, by Kyle Idleman. It's just a fantastic book, and he tells this story. Let me just read it in closing. I was speaking at an event where I had the opportunity to meet a man I'll call Adam. Adam shared with me that a number of years ago, he'd spent some time in prison. He didn't say what he had been convicted of, and I didn't ask. When he went into prison, he was illiterate, totally unable to read or write, but another inmate, basically he was a follower of Jesus, came and taught him how to read and write using the Bible. And in the process, Adam gave his life to Jesus Christ. He said that when he was released, he tried to get connected with a church in the small town where he lived. But people in the church found out about his background, and a number of them felt uncomfortable with him being there. They didn't think he belonged in with the healthy branches like them. One prominent family, longtime members of the church, who seemed, in all appearances to be producing all kinds of fruit, finally told the pastor that he would need to ask Adam to go or they were going to leave. And in their minds, it was time for Adam to be officially cut off. The pastor explained to the family, that Jesus had come for people just like Adam. Family ended up leaving, and others threatened to follow. Adam started thinking that maybe he had made such a mess of his life that he ought to disconnect from God and from the church. One Sunday night after the message, the pastor asked Adam to come up to the front, and Adam knew immediately what was going to happen. He was sure that the pastor had found out about his crimes and was going to tell everybody about them and then cut him off. He made his way to the front with his head down. He was so ashamed over what was about to happen. Some of the church members present at the service wanted Adam to leave, but they wished the pastor, would just remove him quietly. This was awkward. When Adam reached the front, the pastor said he needed to tell the church about a decision that he had made. And he explained that since being released, Adam had not been able to find work. And the pastor said, I brought Adam up here because I want to offer him a job. Adam, I'd like to have you take care of the church facilities. And he handed him a wad of keys to open and close the church on Sundays and to be able to get in and do the cleaning. And Kyle said, as Adam told me his story, tears were streaming down his face. He told me he'd never had a key to anything in his entire life. And he felt loved, and he felt accepted, and he felt picked up and connected. And Kyle closes with this. By the way, I should mention that I wasn't speaking at a prison. I was speaking at a pastor's conference. Adam had been handed the keys 6 years earlier, and he's now the pastor of that church. And it's so like Jesus, isn't it? He picks us up. He cleans us off. He renews us. He redeems us. He forgives us. He helps us. He helps us to bear fruit. He helps us back up when we fall. He's the God who helps us to bear fruit. Jesus wants to do that. See, you and I have a choice. We can be this, we can be the branch, the dead branch, and it's fallen on the ground and so on, doesn't have any life, and it's never going to bear any fruit. Or we can be this. We can pretend, we can have the kind of the plastic plant that the lady kept on watering. We can just fake it, pretend that we're alive and so on. When everybody, if they get close enough, can tell that the fruit is just wired to this branch. Or we can be genuine. We can really bear fruit. We can make the difference with our lives that we're called to make. And I just want to say, stay with Jesus. Remain in him. Stay connected. And be the branch. Let's pray. God, we all feel disconnected. We all feel messed up. We all sometimes feel like you ought to just cut us off and get rid of us. But your love goes way, 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 way beyond that. You are the God. You're the great shepherd of the sheep. You are the God of fruitfulness. You're the gardener who picks us up out of the dirt. You're the gardener who helps us, who cleans us off, who helps us to bear good fruit. Help us to be fruitful. Help us to make the difference with our lives that we are called to make, so that when we hand our lives back into you, we won't be handing in a bunch of plastic fruit. It will be the real thing. Give us your grace. Amen. And may God, the great gardener, watch over you. Just be the branch.